Day.
And I'm Richard Day.
We're both chiropractors.
We've been in practice together for 11 years.
Married for 10.
With 3 beautiful little girls.
We know it's possible to have an exceptional practice that's built around your life.
Because we've done it.
So we've created this podcast,
the Lifestyle Practice Builders Podcast.
We'll interview chiropractors, answer questions, and bring you resources to help build and grow your practice.
So let's get this party started.
Welcome back to the Lifestyle Practice Builders Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Haley Day, and today I spoke with Dr. Danielle Eaton, who graduated from Logan College of Chiropractic in 2008. In the initial years of practice, she worked in a multidisciplinary sports medicine center on Logan's campus, where she also helped future graduates start their practices. After Danielle became a mom, she left her role as Assistant Director of Sports and Rehabilitation and ventured into private practice. In 2017, she founded Aligned Women, which is today the #1 program for women in chiropractic, teaching them how to build profitable practices while still being present with their families. In this episode, Danielle and I talk about how she came upon her own lifestyle practice working out of her home in Washington, Kansas. If you want to learn more about creating your own lifestyle practice, visit our website, lifestylepracticebuilders.com. There you can download our free practice startup checklist as well as other resources for building and growing your practice. Thanks for joining us today. Let's give the interview a listen. Dr. Danielle, thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me. It's always fun to podcast with another podcaster.
Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your journey to chiropractic and how you became a chiropractor?
You know, my journey to chiropractic is not the typical story. A lot of people, at least from my perception, a lot of people had gone to a chiropractor and had an amazing life-changing experience that led them to going to chiropractic school. And I didn't have that. I had only been to a chiropractor like 2 or 3 times before choosing to go to chiropractic school. And I literally chose it because it seemed like a good way to be able to combine my undergraduate studies and work experience into one future direction. So I had studied marketing and social work in undergrad, and it felt like 2 opposite ends of the world. And chiropractic just made sense for me then to be able to combine my desire to help people, but also to be able to own my own business. So I just made this crazy leap into chiropractic school after that realization. And I had no idea what I was in for.
What did your family say?
They didn't say a lot. I think they may have thought I was a little crazy because we don't have any doctors or chiropractors or a dentist, anything like that in my family at all. And in fact, most of the women in my family have been teachers historically.
Okay.
And I have also taught for several years, and now I homeschool my kids, so I'm still a teacher. But yeah, they were just like, well, that's out of left field. What? And chiropractors are kind of weird. You're sure you want to do that? And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I was in a very similar boat. I had not ever been to a chiropractor until I worked for one in undergrad. And so when I decided a few years after undergrad to go to chiropractic school, my family was kind of, okay, this is the next thing. But I knew it was the final thing. And for them, it was kind of just like, maybe I'm trying it out because that's what you do during that phase. So I think that's cool that we both ended up sticking with it and have done well.
There was certainly a phase in chiropractic school that I was like, oh my gosh, I made the wrong choice. And the reason that came up for me at that time was because at least then I felt very black and white about things. Like I wanted to go to chiropractic school and I wanted to be taught how to do this thing called chiropractic and what chiropractic was. And at a certain point in the studies through the doctorate program, I felt like I had this realization that, oh, nobody really knows what chiropractic is. And there's all these different techniques, like hundreds of different techniques. And even our instructors don't agree on what we're doing, or there isn't what we would call inter-examiner reliability in the classroom setting from one examiner to the next with our instructors even. And I started seeing that and I was like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? But by that point, I felt like it was too late. I was like too far into the student loan debt to go back. I was committed and I was going to figure out a way to make it work. So I just stuck it out.
And I think that's similar. My brother's an attorney, and I think that's similar for other professions to question it and to realize it's different, or there's different ways to go about. And you think you've kind of picked your path, but you haven't. There's several, now you need to pick between these paths and these paths. So
yeah,
I think that's fun. So you currently practice out of your house, right?
I do. Yes.
And so tell us about kind of what you did after school and how you started into your working in your house.
Interestingly, I kind of forget about this sometimes, but when I was a student in chiropractic school, I actually had this notion, this kind of like crazy dream that I wanted to have a live workspace. And at that time, my vision for it was more in like an urban type of setting. I live in the St. Louis area. And so I thought like I would live in the city and have a live workspace in a more urban type of area, partially because I was uncertain clinically when I was nearing the time of graduation. I applied for a residency program and was accepted into the program. So a week after I graduated from chiropractic school, I was then on the faculty and teaching classes that I had just taken a few months prior. It was so crazy. And talk about imposter syndrome. But my residency was 2 years and I worked in the sports and rehab department. And I earned my CCSP and my master's in sports and rehab during that time. And then at the end of my residency, I was promoted to assistant director of sports and rehab. And shortly after that, I had my first baby. And after she was born, I started to really reevaluate what I was doing with everything in life, especially with work, because work often took me away from home for so many hours on lots of nights and weekends and traveling to other states and even other countries in the job that I had at that time. And I just didn't feel like I could do my job the same way I had done it before I was a mom. Mm-hmm. And I was totally unprepared. Like really, everyone around me told me, you'll have this baby and then you won't want to come back to work. And we're going to be so sad when you don't want to come back. And I'm like, why would that happen? I love working. I love my job. I love my career. I love the environment here. Why would I want to hang out with a baby all day? And well, then of course, if you've had children of your own, they come out and then it is like everything changes. Yeah. So yeah, I really did start reevaluating what I wanted. And I remembered the reason that I went to chiropractic school in the first place was to be able to have my own business and have the freedom and the flexibility that can come along with that. Mm-hmm. So she was not quite, she must have been like around 9 months old. I almost said 9 years old, 9 months old. And I decided to start my own practice. And interestingly, I made that choice so that I could have more time freedom to be with my kiddo. But because my expenses were higher than what they needed to be at that time, and because I was really afraid of not making enough money, I found myself working even more in my own practice than what I had been when I had a steady paycheck and paid vacations for time off. So long story short, my first practice, it was an insurance practice. It grew really, really quickly and it was really busy. I fell out of love for a while with chiropractic in general, but especially with practicing in that kind of a business model. Mm-hmm. That was all I knew at the time, was like work hard, hustle, work all the hours, be everywhere and do everything, and you'll be successful. But there was a lot more coming that I needed to learn in order to be successful in practice. And then when I found myself pregnant again, sort of by surprise. So I was pregnant and we were not necessarily planning to have another baby. And I thought, okay, great. This is an opportunity for me to start making some changes in my practice and in my business. And I can hire an associate and I can work less hours. And I was really excited about doing those things. And unfortunately, I miscarried that pregnancy. It was near the end of the first trimester, the beginning of the second trimester. So like I had gotten to a point where I thought like, it's all good. And I had been telling patients and I was showing, I was like obviously pregnant already. There was something changing with my body. So I miscarried and I went into this horrible place, like the lowest low ever in my life. And I felt like the reason that I wasn't able to carry that pregnancy was because of how hard I'd been working my body and how stressed I had been and how little I was taking care of myself and like not exercising on a regular basis, which has always been really important to me and not eating the foods that I knew were good for my body. And even though there was no way for me to prove that the miscarriage happened because of any of those things, that was my truth at that time. I felt so embarrassed, ashamed, frustrated, disappointed. I felt all of these things about myself. I just felt like an utter failure, essentially. Lo and behold, 8 weeks after the miscarriage, I was pregnant again. And at that point, I was committed to having a healthy baby, and I could see no other, I could see nothing else, right? Like nothing else mattered. I'm going to have a healthy baby no matter what I have to do. And so it was just another 6 weeks later that I handed the keys over to my practice to a doctor that had just graduated, who I had known for several years, even before he went to chiropractic school. So I felt like I had a lot of trust in him, and he knew me, he trusted me. And I just kind of like walked away. I didn't even really have a transition period for him to help him really get off to a good start. And then I just went into like, okay, what am I doing next? I knew that I was still an entrepreneur in my heart. And I knew that I still loved health and fitness and wellness. And at the time I was like, I'm not sure about chiropractic, if that's a part of my future or not. Because again, the only way I knew how to practice was working a lot of hours, being everywhere, doing all the marketing events I possibly could to grow as quickly as I could. And over the course of the next year or so, I started reading a lot of books, and I discovered podcasts, and I even had my first coach. And it became really clear to me, oh, we can actually grow businesses in a different way. And the term lifestyle business presented itself to me for the first time. That was eye-opening. I was like, lifestyle business, huh? So I could actually design my practice to fit around the life that I wanted to live. Now that's a new idea, okay? Which sounds so silly now, 6 years later, but at the time it was like revelatory to me.
Even though that's why you chose chiropractic.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It was just like having those words to put on the thing really made me see, oh, this is a thing that people do. This is not just a pipe dream. This is not just, me being me with crazy ideas and big visions. It was something that other people were able to obtain. And so I kind of simultaneously started coaching and creating my second practice at the same time. And when I started my second practice, I did it way differently. In fact, I wasn't in my home at that time, but transitioned to it when my youngest daughter was born. So if we back up to the time that I started into the second practice, I rented a room for $300 a month, which was crazy. And I had a laptop already. I had a chiropractic table. I had my hands. I paid like $20 a month for website hosting. My operating expenses were essentially like less than $600 a month in comparison to $5,000 a month previously or more, right? And I realized with my expenses so low that it didn't take a whole lot for me to be able to like pay myself from my business, right? And then be able to buy groceries. And my husband was like, "You're actually making money." I'm like, yeah, I am. Because what he had known previously and the way that I had practiced before was, well, I go to work, but I don't bring home very much money, right? And in this case, I was working less than 15 hours a week in my practice. I was just really clear on how much time do I really have available. I had an hour drive to the office location that I was practicing in. I chose that location, by the way, because I knew that we were going to be moving to this new town where we had bought land and we were going to be building a house. And it just made sense for me in my mind to go ahead and get started with my practice now before we move there. So I've got momentum going. And then in the process of building the house and starting my second practice, surprise, another baby is coming. I want to add the caveat here that in my first marriage, we experienced infertility for 5 years. So each of my daughters has been a tremendous blessing. And every time I've found myself pregnant, I'm like, wow, that is so, like, it to me is so special. And then I was like, okay, great. So we're building a house. I think we better make an office in the house so that I have plenty of flexibility as this new baby comes into our family. And thank goodness I had the foresight to do that, because when we added our youngest, who will actually be 2 tomorrow, I went into my pregnancy with her and, thinking about like the future with her and our family, just kind of like, well, no big deal. We've done this a few times already. We've added other kids and it was easier than I thought it would be. So I just assumed that this experience would be the same. However, when she was born, I suddenly felt like silly putty. You know, if you can envision taking silly putty in both of your hands and just pulling it in opposite directions, and it kind of stays like a straight line, perhaps until you pull it far enough and then it sags down in the middle. I felt like the silly putty. Like I was pulled in so many different directions and I was just like sagging down in the middle. And that was because of managing that many kids was a whole new ballgame. It still is more challenging than what I had ever anticipated that it would be now, even with her being 2. So that was my transition to a home office. And it's interesting that I don't know that I've ever really thought about it, but it brings me kind of full circle to where I thought I would be in practice from the beginning, just in a rural area now instead of an urban area, which is fine. Interestingly, there's a farm across the street from my home. We're the last house on our street in our subdivision, and it's never been an issue. People always say, I don't think there's enough people in this area, or I can't target market because I live in a rural place. And I'm like, nope, none of that has to limit you. There actually is a really great example of this in my area in a veterinary office. She also has 4 children. She's been in practice for probably close to 40 years now. And I took my cat to her and we drive to her office, and I didn't realize it until we were almost there. Oh, she has a home office. How crazy is that? And so I'm thinking like, we must be going to the wrong place, or maybe I have the wrong address. And then I finally see this little sign. And that's when I realized, oh, she's got a home office. Okay, cool. And so we go into her basement where her home office is as a veterinary clinic. And she's examining the cat, and I'm talking with her. And I said, so have you always had a home office? And she said, yes, because by the time I graduated from vet school, I was already a mom, and I had no other idea about how I could practice and be a mom. And then so she had one, and then she had another, and then she had twins a few years later. And she said, and after my twins came, there was no other option. And it was really validating to me to hear her experience and have her share that with me. Even though she's a vet and we're chiropractors, there's a lot of similarities. And as I was going to and leaving her home office, that was like on this really bumpy gravel road that I was a little concerned about driving my low riding minivan on. It just confirmed for me, like, she's been doing this for 40 years. And it's probably never crossed her mind to do this in a different way, right? Because this is what worked best for her family first. And people come to her because of who she is and the care that she provides, even though she's got a really bumpy gravel road leading to her office.
Yeah, I hear a couple limiting beliefs there from students. We're in Kansas City, so there's more population where we're at, and we have 3 other chiropractors that lease space in our office. People say, well, I can't stay in Kansas City because there's too many chiropractors here, and it doesn't matter. There's enough people to come see everyone, and everyone's different. And then also the coming to your home. You know, if somebody doesn't like that, they won't come. But there will be plenty of people that enjoy it, that enjoy your kids or your cat, or, coming into a comfy, cozy family place and being cared for by someone who truly cares. So I agree. Those things shouldn't hold people back from how they see themselves practicing.
People really love our house at Christmas time because my husband, he just goes over the top with our Christmas tree. And if we're friends on Facebook, then you may have seen them over the last couple of years.
Yeah. I think last year, I think the first year you were in the house.
Yes. Yeah. So it was actually 3 Christmases ago now.
Okay.
It's been that long, but our first Christmas tree here in this house was almost 18 feet tall, and it was crazy.
Which honestly doesn't sound huge, but when you think about it, that's like 3 times the size of most people's Christmas trees. And it was huge. You guys
not only is it tall, it's also really big around.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you live with it in your house, you realize how much of a thing it is. Like you literally have a tree living in your home.
Hopefully there are no birds in it still.
No, thank goodness we've never had that happen. Trust me, it has crossed my mind.
So you've been practicing now in your home for 3 years?
It has been, almost 2.5 years.
Okay. And is the town growing, or is it pretty much the same?
That's an interesting question. I honestly don't know. I would guess that it's
Not noticeably.
There's lots of new homes being built here.
Okay.
So that's probably a sign that it is growing, but I wouldn't say it's growing in regard to commerce so much. There's not a lot of new businesses coming into the area.
And do you rely mostly on referrals from other patients, or do you market outside of that?
At this point, I'm like, do I rely on them? I guess I do rely on referrals from other patients and other professionals in the area. So that was essentially how I got started. Was in this new area, it was really easy for me to reach out to people that I didn't know, who were doulas or birth photographers or lactation consultants, and just say, hey, I'm Danielle. I'm a chiropractor. I'm going to be moving to the area soon, and I would just love to meet you. And I did that over and over and over again and started building relationships. And I picked up momentum in my practice really quickly, not because I was then saying, and do you want to become a patient in my practice to those people, but it just happened organically. And after my youngest daughter was born, I was like, okay, it's time to make a choice. It was when she was about 8 months old and life had been so crazy. I had had my appendix removed, urgent, not quite emergent scenario that arose, and had that happened just 5 months after her birth. And we had an accident in our home where my daughter fell down the stairs, not our baby. This would have been my then 7-year-old. And I was working at the time that it happened. And it just seemed like, okay, Danielle, pay attention to what's going on here. Like the universe is giving you signs that you need to be really clear about what you're doing, how you're spending your time, what's important, etc. So I was like, am I going to continue to grow 2 businesses at the same time? Or am I going to focus on the growth of one? What am I doing? And is it really realistic for me to have 4 kids and a husband who at that time was also working full-time plus a seasonal part-time job that is like full-time during the season? And I also really evaluated what would I want someone else to do. So as much as I have aspirations for one day moving my practice out of my home and having a bigger space and having other providers, other chiropractors that I work alongside with, right now, my home office is great.
Yeah.
It allowed me to have a 12-week maternity leave, for example, because I wasn't worried about paying a $2,000 or $3,000 lease. I didn't have to pay any rents to my home or for my home. And my expenses in my practice were really low, and we had other sources of income coming into our family. So I didn't feel the guilt that a lot of women feel when they take time off of their practice and their patients are like, wait, what? You're doing what? We see a lot of women in our profession take 2 or 3 weeks off of practice after their deliveries. And that's not something we would ever advise our patients to do. We know that for the first 2 weeks after birth, mom and baby just need to be co-regulating. And that's like laying in bed and resting, not really doing much else. And yet we're going back to work. I knew that was not going to work for me this time around.
Yeah. And I see a lot of chiropractors that would rather just leave their practice and take the time off and not find someone to cover. And I think it's really important to have somebody who can cover and you don't feel so stressed. And sure, you're not going to make all the money, but it's nice to feel like you can step away and have someone take care of those people like you would when you aren't able to be there.
One of the biggest things that I see in this process of supporting women through their maternity leaves is that we often don't plan ahead for things like a maternity leave until we're all the way through the first trimester of pregnancy. And then you've got 30-ish weeks from that point to start to financially plan to take time away from your practice or to have someone else cover your practice. And that takes time to train that person as well. And so it's not to say that if you're in a situation right now where you're like, yeah, we're going to be having a baby soon and we don't have anything in place, that you can't make it work. You totally can. It's just, it would be perhaps more ideal if we had a longer runway of preparation for that really big phase transition in our lives. But if you're like me, you might be underestimating how big of a transition that phase will be.
Yeah, we have 3 girls in 3.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I understand the overwhelm.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
So what are some tools that you use in your practice to keep overhead low? Do you use an answering service or online scheduling? That kind
Online
of thing?
scheduling. Yes.
Okay.
I do. I love online scheduling. In the moment with people, I do the scheduling for them as much as possible. But because here in my office, it's just one room, I don't have the ability to, in a regular clinic setting, for example, step out of the room and, let that person get their things gathered up and head out of the office. So I have to be really clear and direct with my communication proactively and also in the moment. So I schedule people for their future appointments as often as possible, but I also let them know that I can't babysit them. Like they're going to have to be autonomous. And here's like what you need to know to be a patient. You need to know where to park. You need to know, like you come to the front door, you need to know that we use online scheduling and that we keep things as efficient as possible. And I love you and I want to hear about how things are going in your life. But if there's someone else heading in for their appointment, then it's your time to head out. Yeah. So while it might seem to other people like, oh, it's a limitation, or I can't do that because people would be confused or they'll feel slighted, or there's tons of limiting thoughts that can come up around this. And I've practiced now being clear and direct in my communication with enough people that they know I'm doing it not because I don't like them or because I don't care. It's just, that's how I run my business.
Yeah, I like that. Something we've never done is reminder calls because I refuse to babysit. And I see a lot of people on Facebook, what service are you using and what's working? And I just think, we don't have patients not come in because we don't call them. Mm-hmm. We don't have that problem because we've never called people to remind them to come in. So I think that's one of those things where you can get caught up in something you think is important, but it may not be.
And you've probably also, though, set the tone or the expectation with them that you don't have a high tolerance for missed appointments or no-shows, that if they have an appointment, you expect them to be there. You may not say it in those words, but that's just probably a part of the culture that you've created in your practice.
Yeah. So have you used anything that didn't work?
Paper documentation. Documentation for me has always been a thorn in my side from the time that I started practice, even working in the university setting where we transitioned to EHR really quickly, really early on. The EHR that we started using at that time, I bought the software when I was starting my own practice. It changed names a couple of times. I just kept sticking it out with them. And eventually I was like, you know what? I'm never current on my documentation. I always feel behind. I always feel like I need to spend time catching up. And part of it is because the system is so not efficient for me. Uh-huh. And so I transitioned back to paper as just like, I know how to do this. And it was quick and easy at that time. But then coming to a home office, I realized I don't have space to store stuff. And then there's like the HIPAA protected part. And I just knew that to keep things simple, I needed to not have clutter around and not have paper stacking up. And I didn't want to be printing stuff. So I transitioned back to an EHR and it's actually been really, really good.
Awesome. So I want to provide some actionable content for our listeners. You have 4 daughters. Can you give us some advice on increasing profitability of the practice without taking away from our families?
Absolutely. I heard this advice a couple of years ago on a podcast that was not chiropractic related, but I took the advice and I thought, how can we apply this to chiropractic as a profession in what we do in our businesses? And the advice was that in a service-based industry, we should increase our fees 10% 2 times a year. When I share that with other chiropractors, they're like, what? And it does seem like a lot. I think part of that is because we oftentimes are in network with medical insurance plans that set our fees for us. And we have forgotten that we have the autonomy to decide what our fees are and to raise them anytime that we want to when we're not contracted with major medical insurances specifically. So if you're looking at how you can increase your profitability and you have the flexibility to do this, increase your fees. Every person I've known that has done this reports back and says, I did it. Nothing bad happened. I'm like, cool. Okay. Nothing bad happened. So that tells you what? And essentially it's just like people don't really mind. It's not an issue. I know when I look at it from the perspective of me as a consumer going to Target or Starbucks, I don't drink coffee, but my kids love the treats at Starbucks. I know that what we pay now is more than what we used to pay, but I don't stop going because of it.
Yeah. Well, and people want to see you, the doctor. Did they, when we raise our prices, they say, well, I'm not going to not come see you. Mm-hmm. So they seem to totally understand and keep coming.
Right. Has your cost for operating your business gone down at all over the course of the time that you've had your practice open?
No, leases go up. Our lease goes up. Well, it did every year for the first few years. And
exactly. Yes. And so a lot of times we think we need to make more money. That means we need to see more patients. Sometimes, yes. But sometimes the fastest way to make more money in your practice is to increase your fees.
Mm-hmm. So let's go just back to life. Do you have any daily rituals or habits that you do day to day to kind of stay on track?
I have a lot of them. I don't necessarily do all of them every day, but what is really important for me is that I exercise at least 5 times a week. And that exercise has to have cardiovascular activity in it. That's what I found is really best for helping me manage my stress level. It is probably something about the way I metabolize cortisol and insulin because of cardiovascular activity and journaling. That's really, really big for me. I have to be able to do it though in a time and space that I'm alone, that there's not someone standing over my shoulder like, what are you writing? And then I can just like get into a zone and let all the thoughts out. And it's really helpful for me to go back months later and just kind of like peek at what I wrote previously and see how much my thought process has changed, and it's evidence of growth for me. So it's actually something I've done ever since I was like 12.
Nice.
In addition to that, I would say this is probably actually my favorite thing is that every night my girls and I say what we're grateful for. And they say what they're thankful for. I don't know that the wording of it necessarily matters, but I started this with my now 9-year-old when she was 4, because she was constantly asking for new toys. And I was like so frustrated about how much she already had and how much she was asking for all the time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's it. We're going to start a gratitude practice. I'm going to make you grateful. And so when she started at that time, she couldn't read or write yet. So I would have her draw pictures each night of what she was grateful for that day. And shortly after I guess it was probably a few months in, I realized that my toddler could talk and we had never asked her what she was thankful for. And the first time I said, and Ayla, what are you thankful for today? She just, like, what came out of her mouth was so amazing to me. She said her mom, which is my mom, her grandmom, her papa, her nana, her other papa. She listed all of her cousins, all of her sisters, her mom, her dad, the dog. It was like, she just kept going on. And I was like, whoa, I didn't even know she could say that many words. But because she had heard my other daughter and I every night do this together, when it came time for her to have the invitation to say something, it was like in her mind already. She was already in the habit. She didn't sit and think like, nope, I've got nothing to be grateful for. She had tons of things to be grateful for. And her initial list was all the people in her life. It was so beautiful.
Love that. We lay with our girls every night and talk to them about things, and we often ask them what they're thankful for or what's important to them. And I love to hear their answers. So do you have a favorite book that you would recommend?
My top 2 are not chiropractic or even health related specifically, I guess sort of mental health. They were just what were the most impactful for me. I read Loving What Is by Byron Katie in 2015, I think it was. And I listened to it on audiobook, actually. I felt like my brain was rewiring itself as I listened to it. And I was so consumed by what I was hearing. I listened to the whole book in less than 24 hours. And that one like really helped me to be able to see that we create our realities, and everything that we don't like, every judgment that we have against someone else, it really comes back to how we feel about ourselves and what we're choosing to believe about the world and about ourselves as well. And shortly after that, I read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. Mm-hmm. And that one kind of did the same thing. I actually had like an emotional breakdown when I was in a hotel room one weekend with my husband. I was reading this book and we were supposed to be like away having fun without our kids. And I couldn't stop reading this book. And I just had this moment of realization about some things I had not let go of, specifically in regard to the pregnancy that I had lost, that I had carried forward so much guilt. And I was still kind of punishing myself for the experience, even a couple of years later, even after my next baby had been born. And she was almost a year old at the time. And I realized through reading that book, like, whoa, I've been punishing myself for something that I don't even know I had any control over, or was, like maybe it was just meant to be that way, even though it was painful and it was really hard to go through. It wasn't my choice. That book, if you haven't read it, I don't know if I want to go there. It's actually really good.
I actually have started it and not finished it, not for any reason other than life, but it is on my nightstand. So I will interested to read it now.
It's one that I refer back to often, and I've read the whole thing twice. The second time I definitely took different things away from it than the first time. So
I was going to ask you if you had listened to the first book again yet.
No, I haven't.
You should. I do. See, and that's what I do is I'll re-listen to books I really like. And so I don't move on to the next book real well. I feel like what I'm thinking just keeps progressing each time I listen to it. I listened to Start With Why by Simon Sinek this year. And I realized listening to it that I had listened to it last year, but I don't think I listened to it well enough because I'm just in a different place. I just started back into practice at the end of last year. And so I think for me, it had more meaning for the practice, whereas before maybe for the podcast, I was listening to it. So, but I love that. I love reading. And I think, books and we rarely have a health book recommendation because everyone's more into the business side that comes on. So.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And, some of the most impactful books, clearly, probably, for me in regard to my work life and business have not specifically been about business. They're more so about what we would call mindset, right? And like developing yourself personally. I don't know that I've realized that before, but yeah, it's to me, things that I learned about myself or about how I look at the world or about my fears. Those are the things that when I learn how to move through them, make the biggest impact in my career.
Mm-hmm. And knowing how to utilize chiropractic and having that help you grow, having those kinds of books in the mindset to grow and to provide a better experience or to give more intention and more attention to your patients. So,
yes.
Awesome. And you have your own podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Yep. It's the Aligned Women Podcast. And it's specifically for women who are chiropractors. I launched it in August of 2016. So we are in our 4th year now. I can't believe it's been that long. It's been something that has definitely been a labor of love. And we've got almost 140 episodes. Actually, there are 141 recorded at the moment, but not all released yet. So there's tons of insights into how to balance life and work, specifically as a woman who has a practice and is raising a family, as well as increasing the profitability of your practice so that you can be present with your family without just working more hours all the time like I used to.
Awesome. I think for anyone who's enjoyed this episode, they will surely find a lot of good information there. What has been the best business advice you've ever received?
I think the way that I would answer this question is perhaps a little unusual, but I had a mentor when I worked at Logan who people either loved him or hated him. And I hated him for quite a while at first. And then I really loved him. And he really helped me grow from being a really shy, introverted, scared of putting myself out there person to someone who was much more confident and capable. Why he put me in so many scenarios where I wasn't qualified to be in, I have no idea. He just, for some reason, trusted that he could put me on the sidelines of a football game and I wouldn't be negligent. Like, I'd figure out the best course of action, even though I felt like I had no clue what I was doing. And I think that the takeaway for me with this is, like, he believed in me more than I believed in myself. And he never specifically said that to me, but I remember that often. Like, he put me in situations because he knew I was capable before I knew I was capable. And that applies to a lot of things, learning how to adjust, for example. Like, it's really scary in the beginning. At least it was for me. I know a lot of my classmates felt the same way. But you have to do it. There's no way to get good at adjusting by not adjusting. Mm-hmm. And that applies to so many things in our businesses too. Like, there's no way to get good at having a financial conversation with a patient by not having a financial conversation with a patient. There's no way to get really good at marketing your practice if you don't market your practice. You have to do the thing that you are not certain you know how to do, or not certain that you can do. You can after you do it.
Yeah. I see that a lot with students. They kind of want the perfect answer to a business question, and there isn't. It's different. A lot of answers are different in every state, in every situation. And the best you can do is get some advice and run with it and do what you can. And your first patient interaction is not going to be perfect, and your first time billing is not going to be perfect, but you learn and you keep going. And that's how everyone's done it. So
yes,
that's great advice. So what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Probably on Facebook. I think it sounds kind of crazy for me to say this. I think I'm getting close to the number of friends I can accept on Facebook, but that's probably the best place to connect with me personally. I do have a free Facebook group called Mama Chiropractors. We opened that initially in, I think it was 2015 or 16. And then there was an incident that happened. We had to close the whole group down, move it to a new location. So it has existed for a few years now. It's not as big as it used to be, and that's okay. I think it's actually better this way overall. But if you search Mama Chiropractors on Facebook, you should find it pretty easily.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on. I loved our conversation. I appreciate your time and everything that you've done for women in chiropractic. And thank you for being on.
Thank you so much. It's been awesome.
If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please share it with your friends on Instagram and Facebook. And for those of you who are already subscribers, we really appreciate it. Thanks for the reviews. We love reading those and knowing that you're loving the podcast. If you're looking for more tips and inspiration, be sure to check us out at lifestylepracticebuilders.com or join our business and marketing Facebook group for chiropractors at facebook.com/group/lifestylepractice.